Welcome to the Random City Podcast.
Chester Copperpot! He was a pro! He never made it this far.
A competitor. He was very good.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it.
Where did you come from? From your blood.
I'm Groot. You will be.
When Godzilla's coming, y'all be tripping.
Just listen to the old pork chop express steak his advice on a dark and stormy night.
You underestimate my power.
He's gonna be the third scariest thing on that train.
These guys come from legend. They're basically gods.
There's only one god, man. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that.
Welcome back to the Random City Podcast. I'm Jimmy and Georgia, your host as always, and we're back for a special anniversary edition of the show. March 21st, 2019, the date that this episode releases, marks the 10th anniversary of the Random City Podcast. I'm assuming that this is the only podcast that's still going 10 years later, but hasn't hit 100 episodes, which might be the tagline for the next, however long it takes me to get to 100. Anyway, we're back once again, as I like to say, and we're going to talk about some random stuff. One of the things I want to mention here, 10 years is a long time. A decade has passed since the initial episode was posted so long ago. It's just crazy how time goes by. I don't know. One of the things I was thinking this afternoon, I'm recording on March 20th, 2019. And I was thinking this afternoon of things that have changed over the past 10 years as far as things I would talk about in the podcast. Like starting off, I talked a bit about television shows, movies, books, and I still do that occasionally, obviously. Further on down the line, like into season 2, as I call it now, I talked about Iron Man 2 the day that it was released, which is actually a decent episode. I listened to some of that this afternoon as I was thinking about the 10th anniversary of the show, and it's interesting. It really is. I'm still into Marvel movies. I'm still into some of the TV shows. The Office was one of my early topics early on, and I'm still digging The Office. I've watched the whole thing through like 6 times-ish. I'm almost there again, I think, on the 6th time through, I'm pretty sure, if I haven't lost count. And that's not including going back and watching commentaries, which I found out were a thing, whatever. But, I've done through a lot of those as well, just to listen to the cast talk about different things. But anyway, apart from that, so there are things like that are still an ongoing thing. But there are other things that 10 years ago when the podcast started, I was a big fan of that I've kind of fallen off of. Like Lost, Battlestar Galactica are 2 great examples. The day I recorded the first episode of this podcast was I believe it was the day after Battlestar Galactica had aired its finale. And for me, I absolutely loved Battlestar Galactica from season 1 to season 3. Didn't really care for the opening miniseries. Season 4 just seemed to drag on for me, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. And then the finale was not terrible. Didn't hate it, the whole loopy thing. But it overall, that last season kind of ruined the show for me. Lost. I loved Lost. I was obsessed with Lost. Lost was like one of the biggest parts of my life for a while. Like legitimately having Lost parties, making Dharma labels for things for people to come over and watch Lost at my viewing parties. Like, I didn't ever have a big crowd, maybe 3-4 people, but I would have people over to watch Lost. We were all into it so much. That last season, I liked it until they explained what had happened, and I really kind of just, I have not watched an episode of Lost in almost 9 years. But at the time of this show starting, it was still one of my big things that I was into. And so I'm one of those people, if I like something, I will continue following it. If I don't like it, I will stop. I've stopped watching professional wrestling on multiple occasions over the years. In the late 90s, I thought it was a little too risque, so I stopped watching it. I got back into it when SmackDown was on UPN, and maybe even the CW. I forget when the CW started. But after a while, I just got bored with it, so I stopped watching again. Started watching when CM Punk was having a run. And then probably was last summer. Yeah, last summer I stopped watching the program. It's not good. They're not telling good stories. They're not developing characters. It's just not there for me anymore. Even though this is something I've literally grew up with, something I've enjoyed. Growing up in the South, I was more of a WCW fan than WWF. I like WWF, but I didn't care for some of the shenanigans they did with Doink the Clown or whatever. I like Sting, I like Ric Flair, the American Dream, the Thoreaus, baby, the son of a plumber. I like the Southern wrestling things. Going into college, huge. Wrestling was so huge. We would have 20, 30 people over at my friend Scott Barnhill's house to watch wrestling, to pay, we'd all pay like $5. I'm sure he was making some pretty good money on that deal. We'd all pay the money to see, Starrcade 97, whatever it was. But yeah, I stopped watching because it didn't interest me anymore. I want to like wrestling. If there was a good product out there, I would watch it. But to me right now, it's just not. And they don't know what they're doing, is what it seems like, which is sad. I'm an investor. I own stock, literally own stock in WWE, and I've stopped watching their programs. They have an issue. Okay, so speaking of things like that, there are other things in my life that have been a big part of my life that over time, based on what they've done, has lost my interest. That is a thing that happens. Star Wars was a huge part of my life for a long, long, long time. I've talked about it on the show. I was looking back through some of the episodes. I was hyped up because of the Force Awakens trailers that were coming out. I had 2 different episodes about those. Star Wars Rebels trailers, collecting stuff just in general, Grand Admiral Thrawn, whatever. All these different episodes of talking about Star Wars over the years. The Last Jedi in particular just kind of ruined that for me. And I'm in a weird space with Star Wars, and it's not just The Last Jedi. It's also people like Rian Johnson and Pablo Hidalgo, and some others, Chuck Wendig. People just say and do weird, dumb things who are connected to these brands who make me less interested in their products. Someone who has spent, probably not even joking, literally thousands and thousands of dollars over the years on toys and books, just merchandise in general, t-shirts, I don't know, stickers. If it had Star Wars slapped on it, I probably bought it at some point. Cereals, cups. I don't know. I've just got bunches of junk that I, at this point, kind of want to sell, but I also know that the value is not quite there anymore because people are losing interest, and it's not just me. It's not just people. I know people like myself who Star Wars, because of Jake Skywalker, as Mark Hamill put it, because of just the way that people at Lucasfilm and some of their contributors have treated people, have really pushed me away from that galaxy far, far away, which is, I think, is a very sad statement in lots of ways. I honestly feel like the same thing may happen with some other beloved franchises, depending on who is involved and what they do and how they push their own agendas, which I think is just sad. I don't want to get too heavy into those things. I want to love Star Wars, kind of like the wrestling thing I was just saying. I want to watch Star Wars, but I also want it to be good. I want it to be a good story. I want it to be faithful to the characters. That's, again, some of my same problems I have with wrestling right now, is they don't develop the characters like they should, or they give someone the opportunity to be a star, and then they, as they say in wrestling, it's a term they use, they bury them. They make them do stupid things. They lose 17 straight times on pay-per-views because of something. Who knows why? There are things in pop culture I would like to be more interested in that I'm just not. For the most part, one of the things that has changed over the past 10 years, I'm pretty sure by that time, Netflix was streaming. It was in its infancy, I think, right around that time. If it wasn't, it was super close to that time, because I remember watching this stuff years and years ago, living in a certain apartment with a certain roommate. So it's been a long time ago. And early on, Netflix streaming was so limited. It was just old, weird movies you never heard of. It was nothing someone would want to watch. It was only on the computer. It's not like now when you have a smartphone in your pocket and you can watch Netflix while you're in the car or something. That wasn't an option necessarily in 2009. I'm not sure when all those things really spread out, but probably fairly soon after that, actually. Because it would have been around this time as well that I first got my first iPhone, actually, now that I think about it, about 10 years ago. But anyway, just, the way people take in media has changed so much. Like for me, even within the last 2 years, I've gotten way more involved into a YouTube sphere of entertainment than just traditional television. I still watch a few shows that are currently on television, but there's not many. Like right now, the only two shows that I'm somewhat up to date on are The Goldbergs and Schooled, which are on Hulu. But it's Hulu. I mean, yes, they're ABC shows, but I watch them via Hulu. And speaking of things, again, I want to like these things, but then they're just not good. Or they're, it's bad storytelling, bad character development. People aren't going in the right direction, so to speak. The Walking Dead I was a big fan for a long time. And they royally screwed that show up. I mean, in so many different ways. So, again, I'm a fan of these things. And I want them to be better. I want wrestling to be better. I want Star Wars to be better. I want Walking Dead to be better. But at the moment, it doesn't seem that way. We'll wait and see, I guess, on these things. Times change. One of the things I mentioned earlier, I did an episode years ago at this point about Iron Man 2. The day it came out, I was excited about it. I enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. I still like it, and a lot of people don't like it. They say it was, filler. It was all just trying to build towards Avengers, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I like it. I like it a whole lot better than Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 is my least favorite Marvel movie up to this point. I have not seen Captain Marvel. I may not see Captain Marvel anytime soon. The world has changed in so many ways in 10 years. Media has changed. Pop culture has changed. I mean, I heard something recently. Marvel Comics, Marvel is owned by Disney. Disney owns everything. As of the day of recording, they officially own 21st Century Fox, all those properties, television shows, all those movies, all those channels. Which is kind of cool in the thinking of what could happen in Marvel Cinematic Universe, and maybe not so cool in a lot of other ways. But whatever, it'll be okay, I guess. Well, I don't know. Disney can come in and ruin some more stuff, I guess. I don't know. It's just crazy, just the way the landscape of entertainment changes, the way the landscape of culture changes, the way the landscape of politics, everything is constantly changing. The world today is not the world of 10 years ago in so many ways. In some ways good, some ways bad. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles, I suppose. What I was going to say probably a minute or two ago, I heard recently that Marvel Comics may no longer exist soon. Marvel might stop making comics because of poor sales, which is weird. And I guess I should just go ahead and say, if you're listening to this, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you for checking out the show. I know it's sporadic. It is not on any given schedule right now. Like last year, I did. I think I posted shows every Thursday for like 25, 26 weeks for a good portion of the year. It's I don't know. Like I have time to do these things. My main problem most of the time is I don't have something I want to say. Could I look at the news and make up something? Sure. I mean, that's what people do like 3-4 times a day on some of these YouTube channels I follow. Some little bit of news will come out and they'll make 3-4 different videos, and that happens. I mean, that's fine. But at the same time, I don't want to be that tied to a certain time frame, so that 2 weeks from now is not important, much less 2 years. I would like to try to make these episodes a little more evergreen, if possible, a little less time sensitive, and I think I've done a little bit better with that over the past few years. I don't know. Like a lot of the last, I guess it was last year, year before at this point. I don't even remember. Maybe it's 2017. I did a lot of episodes, and a lot of them were focused on movies that were coming out in the theaters and like the history of the franchise, like my thoughts of the Planet of the Apes movies, or my thoughts on, I don't know, Transformers or something to that effect, which I think was kind of a fun way to go about things. I thought about things like that for this year. There were so many movies that are hitting the 30th anniversary or 20th anniversary. Phantom Menace is hitting its 20th here real soon, and under normal circumstances from, say, 2 years ago, I would be super excited about that. But I'm not as excited about it anymore. Just not. And that's okay. I guess this random episode has been just me rambling about 10 years later. I don't know. Didn't have much of a plan. Just sitting here talking, and that's what I do. Well, I guess that's going to wrap up this really random edition of the Random City Podcast as we talk about 10 years later and how things are different, how interests are different, how some things are better, some things are worse. And we're still here. We haven't hit 100 episodes. Yeah, all right. That's my new tagline. The only podcast that's been going for 10 years and hasn't hit 100 episodes. Woohoo! All right. So, I think that's kind of funny. But anyway, thank you for listening to the show. You can listen to the show in all sorts of ways. One of those ways I actually changed not too long ago, or added it to the situation there. You can find the show in Spotify. You can find us in Google Play. We are in Apple, of course, in the Apple Podcast Player, iTunes. You also can find the Jimmy and Georgia radio feed, which combines this and all the other podcasts I started over the years. Recapping that, too, over the past 10 years. Since this podcast started, I had What is the Event? About the event on NBC, which only lasted for one season. I had a show called Falling Skies Cast, which is about the show on TNT, Falling Skies, which lasted about 2.5 seasons. So right at halfway point of the show overall. Didn't make it to the end. I had a really fun podcast for, 12, 13 episodes called The Muppets Podcast, which I enjoyed and just kind of ran out of steam with lots of different things going on in life at that point of time. Around that same time, I was also trying to do the Supernatural Cast, which was honestly my most successful podcast ever, with literally thousands and thousands of downloads, way more than any other podcast. And I made the mistake of, instead of going through the show as I had gone through about a little over half of the first season, I decided, I'm going to jump up to season 8 because that's what's on TV right now. And at the time, I didn't have cable. I got behind. Hulu ran out of the episodes because I was, kind of slow at it sometimes. And I never caught back up. I never started the podcast up. So that was probably my worst idea in podcasting, was to stop doing that show. But I stopped doing it because I jumped to season 8. I should have kept going on through the seasons that I had on DVD. But anyway, those shows are all still available, at least currently. And they are all available in the Jimmy and Georgia radio feed. So you can check those out there. And the ones I mentioned are all still in iTunes. There were a couple others, I think 3 others, that I've ended up taking off iTunes at some point later on. But anyway, thank you for listening. You can contact the show in all sorts of ways. You can find us on social media at Random City on Twitter, at Random City Podcast on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube. I usually post the shows there. It's kind of a slideshow more than anything. It's not really like a video, but it is there on YouTube. And then you can email the show at randomcitypodcast@gmail.com. You can also call into the show, leave a voicemail, 773-71-RANDOM. And I guess that's going to wrap up this 10th anniversary edition of the Random City Podcast. So until next time, whenever that may be, peace.